Last week we started a journey on this 6x6 Mercedes Benz G-Wagon. Now this car's got one massive story to it, but today we're going to focus on getting it started. We will get back to the story of what happened to this beast of a car. My plan was buying another car and taking that car's engine and putting it in this car, as this car was collecting dust for 6 years. So I bought this ML63 AMG. So first we made sure that this car's engine fires up. And as soon as it fired up and we were happy with the engine, we went ahead and removed the engine from this car. So today, we're gonna have to make sure that this engine is gonna work, and if we have to do modifications, we're gonna have to do those modifications, because the goal is to start this car today. So let's go. So here's our engine ready on the stand. We've got a lot of components that we're going to replace. Here's the parts from the old engine. Some of these parts we're gonna have to use. And there's some of our replacement parts that we're going to put into this engine to make it like new. So that's our thermostat. There's our two exhaust manifold gaskets. These are our timing chain tensioners. That's a brand new oil pump. That is 4 camshaft solenoids. There's our 8 spark plugs. This is our rear main seal, a rear crankshaft seal. And this is our front crankshaft seal, replacing that as well. Then we've got these two little one-way valves. That's our modifications that we're going to do to the cylinder heads for the oil pressure. And then we are replacing all the coolant pipes on the front of the engine. We're replacing that goes onto the oil filter housing. There's our chain for our oil pump. These are all seals and gaskets that are disturbed during this whole job, so we're replacing all the seals and gaskets. And then we're still waiting on the timing chains to come from Germany, but there's our parts. But yeah, let's get into it. We're starting off by draining the engine oil so that we can remove the sump. And once the oil is drained, we're going to have to remove the alternator first, because the alternator mounts to the big sump.
Just for the
Once
signal.
the alternator is off, we can go ahead and remove the sump.
There we go, alternator's off.
I'm now just flipping the engine around to allow for easy access to the sumps. The sump is divided into two sections. You've got a small sump that is held in place with E10 bolts. And then you've got the big sump at the bottom that's also held in place with E10 bolts. I'm now tapping the small sump with a rubber mallet to break loose the sealant. I'm now using a puller to break loose the sealant on the big sump. And there's our sump. All right. Okay, so this is a sump that came off our replacement engine, and this is a sump for the 6x6. And as you can see, this is where the oil gets kept. So the small sump mounts over here, and then the small sump mounts over there. But because of differences to the cars, they had to change the sumps completely. And then another thing that I've picked up, so this is the pickup from the 6x6 engine, and this is the pickup from the ML engine. And basically the pickup is on the wrong side because our sump is moving to this side now. So then we just fit this baby. We fit this pickup. We're going to replace the oil pump. And then another thing on these engines, so you've got this little solenoid valve on your oil pump, and what this guy does is at certain speeds, certain RPM, it actually lowers the oil pressure for better fuel consumption. So there's a little plug over here. You can actually go ahead and plug this thing out. Once it's unplugged, this thing will remain in a closed position, which means that you constantly have your maximum oil pressure, and that just prolongs the life of the engine. It doesn't switch on the engine light, it just brings up a fault code. So if you run a diagnostic test, you'll get a fault code for this solenoid valve on the oil pump, but no limp modes and no oil pressure drop, which I just think is beneficial for these engines. I mean, why do you want to drop your oil pressure? Why? The sump's off. I've checked the inside. I'm happy with everything. So this engine looks beautiful on the inside, beautiful, like brand spanking new. I need to remove everything on the front of this engine: crank pulley, water pump, thermostat, oil cooler, oil filter housing, the front covers. We need to get to the tensioners, we need to get to the timing chains, we need to get to the cylinder head so we can put those modifications in for the oil pressure. And I need to remove the whole wiring loom, so we've got quite some stripping to do. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to tackle this engine out and basically rip it into pieces so we can get to the inside. I'm now removing the crankshaft pulley that's held in place with a 27mm bolt. And once that's done, I'm moving over to the thermostat that's held in place with 3 E10 bolts. And that is why we're replacing the thermostat, because this one is broken. I'm now continuing stripping the front of the engine, starting off with removing some bolts for the water pump. Then I'm removing the oil filter housing. Next up is a poly V-belt tensioner and a few idler pulleys. And once that's done, we can finally remove the water pump. I'm now removing the E10 bolts from the 2 small front covers. Once that's done, I can gently pry them off. This engine on startup, there was not a single noise on startup. It was a very good startup, so timing chains look very happy, but we're gonna go ahead and replace these things anyways because they are wear and tear items, and once we're done with this job, we don't want this car to leak oil, to have an engine light, to lose power or leak coolant or anything of the sort. We want this to be like a brand new 6x6 again. Okay, now we need to remove the turbos. Turbochargers are very easy to remove, being accessible with the engine removed. I think with this engine installed, it's impossible to remove these turbochargers. You're going to have to remove the engine if you want to take these turbochargers off. Again, we can check all the cylinders individually, and there's absolutely no signs of any oil consumption whatsoever. So again, another change that we're going to have to make is this is the engine mounting setup for the ML63, and this is for the G-Wagon. As you can see, these 2 bolts right onto that, and then this one bolts right over there. So we're basically just going to take this off, and this is what we're going to use. The heat shield is mounted with E10 bolts, and the engine mounting bracket is held in place with E12 bolts. So that mounts right over there. Just like that. Perfect. And now we can just repeat the same process, removing the right-hand side turbocharger as well. there we have it. Our second turbo's out. Same story over here. The ports are beautiful on the inside. No oil was burned through here. That's success. Now we need to take this off. Heat shields, heat shields. With the turbocharger out of the way, I can now go ahead and remove the right hand side engine mounting and bracket as well. Next up, I'm removing the complete wiring harness for this engine. They look exactly the same, except that there's one pin right over here that is different. And just because of that one wire, I don't want to risk it, so I'm rather going to swap out the two wiring looms as well. And finally, now that the engine is stripped down completely, I can go with this soft wire brush and clean all the sealing surfaces, being careful not getting the sealant to end up inside the engine. Okay, so there we have our engine. It's fairly stripped. Still got one or two small things I need to remove, but I've cleaned the sealing surfaces. I'm happy. I've double checked the old engine block compared to this engine block. I've double checked the front cover. I've double checked the cylinder heads, intake manifold. I've double checked, triple checked everything just to make 110% sure that this engine is going to work, because a lot of people told me that this cannot work. It's a G63 6x6. It's a special car. It's got a special engine. Guess what? I'm busy with the ML63 engine. It's exactly the same thing. I'm going to put this in there. But yeah, it's late. It's late night. I've worked very hard. I'm going to go have a good night's rest now, and then I'll be back early tomorrow morning. So it's a new day, and I'm heading back to the shop now to finish off that engine. So yesterday we've stripped quite a bit, and we still got some cleaning to do. I actually forgot to clean the sump, the two sumps. There's some components I had to clean. I actually forgot to clean that last night, but it was late, so I was a bit tired. Heading back there now. We're going to clean them, and then we're going to start slapping those new parts in so we can get this engine complete to get this engine back in the car. So we are back on the engine. We've cleaned the front nicely of this engine. We've cleaned the bottom. We need to start fitting those new components. I first want to start at the top. Just in case I drop something into the engine, it can still fall out. We're not planning on dropping anything, but prevention is better than cure. So we're going to start off with a slow work at the top. Do the slow work. We're going to do the spark plugs. We're going to do the timing work, and then we're going to do the wiring loom at the top, and then we can start working our way down. Let's go. I'm now removing the coils in order to replace the spark plugs, and it's very crucial and important that you torque your spark plugs to specifications when working on a direct injection engine. And our torque setting is 23 Newton meters. The right bank is complete, so I'm now just repeating the process on the left bank. A common problem on these M157 engines are that you end up getting timing chain noises. It can either come from the timing chain tensioner, from the timing chain, or these camshaft adjusters. So basically what happens is the oil pressure gets applied through the cylinder head, into the timing chain tensioner. And when this vehicle is standing, the oil pressure starts running back down into the engine. So what Mercedes Benz have designed is this little one-way valve. You can get them from the main dealer. So it is this little thing. So this is a one-way valve. So this, we're going to take the timing chain tensioner out, and then at the back of the cylinder head, we're going to press this into the oil gallery that supplies the oil pressure to the tensioner. So it's got a little ball bearing inside. It's spring loaded. So when the oil gets supplied, it pushes the ball bearing out of the way, and then the oil goes into the timing chain tensioner. And once you switch off the car, that little ball bearing shoots back because it's spring loaded, and it shuts it off, which means the oil pressure remains in this tensioner. So it doesn't run back, and it avoids oil loss, causing slack on the tensioner, slack on the chain, causing a rattling noise on startup. And it also, after a long period of time, it can damage these camshaft adjusters, which are super expensive. So these buggers, you don't want to lose them. So we're going to do this repair now, and then that's something of the past. So here we have our new timing chain tensioner. I just want to show you guys what it looks like. Okay, so there's our new tensioner. This pin over here is to hold it in place. It helps you when you put it in, to put it in easier. And then there at the back you can see this is where the oil gets supplied into. Now the oil pressure over here runs back into the cylinder head, causing all that trouble I just explained to you guys. So that one-way valve is going to prevent the oil from running back out of this tensioner. So this tensioner will remain fully loaded with oil pressure. So I've gone ahead and replaced the timing chains, and upon stripping I found that the modification for the tensioners have been done on this engine because of the manufacturing date on this engine. And then I've also gone ahead and upgraded the timing chains to the new spec timing chain, which is a lot stronger and more reliable, and also gives you a smoother running engine. The timing chain tensioners that we fitted to this car is also an upgraded timing chain tensioner that we have fitted to the car. I've also gone ahead and replaced the Hall sensors, which is also an upgraded part, preventing oil from being pushed into the engine control unit as well as your fuel injectors. And here's the part numbers for the old and the new Hall sensors. Okay, so the timing set, tensioners are in, check the timing marks, everything is perfect. We made sure it's nice and clean on the inside. Now we're just going to go ahead and clean the sealing surfaces. Once that's clean, we can put these covers back on and start focusing on the bottom of the engine. I'm now gently applying a thin, consistent layer of sealant on the right small front cover, and then carefully installing it onto the engine, and then tightening up the bolts. And once that's done, I'm basically just repeating the same process on the left hand side. Again, just making sure that I've got a fine, consistent bead of sealant that covers the whole area that needs to seal. And then when I enter the bolts, I torque them to spec, as this is aluminium or aluminum bolts that breaks very easily. Now that the two front covers are on, I can go ahead and put back the camshaft solenoids. The top of the engine's assembled. So we're gonna move down to the bottom now because nothing can drop into the engine now. So now we can flip this baby. And it's right here where my theory didn't make sense at all. I mean, what is the difference if I drop something in the engine from the bottom now? It's exactly the same thing. Anyways, let's move along. Let's just pretend I never said that. So I'm now removing the old oil pump and now we're installing the new replacement oil pump. Okay, now we just make sure that our chain is on properly. It's on, nicely on there as well. And there we have it, new oil pump installed. I'm now putting back the oil pickup and I've also gone ahead and replaced the seal that slides into the oil pump to make sure that this oil pump operates at 110%, not losing a single drop of oil anywhere. And now we're moving over to closing up the engine and I'm busy putting some sealant on the sump. Okay, so we've got our sealer on, so we're going to put the sump on now. And you guys know, if we come to this point, I can sense a startup. A startup is near. Well, we still need to put the engine in, but I can sense a startup is close. I'm excited. And we're done. So there's all our sump bolts in. Sump is on. So now we just need to put the small sump on as well, and then this engine is covered. Then we can start off with the wiring loom and all the add-on accessories like the thermostat, the water pump, the oil cooler gaskets, front crank seal, rear crank seal, all those type of things. So let's go. Okay, so exhaust manifold gasket in place. So I first want to refit the turbochargers to make sure that I can see my oil supply pipes going in correctly into the oil pump before I close up the small sump. Check my seal, slide it nicely into the oil pump. There we go. And now once I'm happy with that, I can go ahead and tighten the turbocharger to the cylinder head. New exhaust manifold gasket. And now we just repeat the same process on the other side of the engine, getting the turbocharger in place, feeding through the oil supply pipe, making sure that it goes into the oil pump, and then once I'm happy, I can tighten the turbocharger. And now with the turbochargers perfectly in place, we can finally go ahead and close up this engine for good. And now with the sump buttoned up, the last thing we need to fit is the oil level sensor. Oil level sensor. That gets bolted down with 3 E10 bolts. And now I can finally fit the complete wiring harness. And there we have it. The wiring loom is in. Sorted. The engine is almost ready to go back into the car. It's very late at the moment. I've had enough. I've had enough. I want to go get some rest, and then tomorrow we can get cracking on this engine again. We can get it sorted. So I got a helping hand finishing off the engine, fitting those last components on the front of the engine, replacing the rear crank seal and all those other components that still needs to go onto the engine, whilst I'm busy prepping the engine bay, making sure that everything is right and ready for this engine to drop down into the car. But there was one thing that was going to stop this car from starting, that got me out on the road to get it sorted. And finally this engine is complete and we can move this engine to its new home. And there she is, half ML, half G63 6x6. And fitting this engine in this engine bay was like playing golf with a tennis ball. This was a lot harder than what I thought it would be. I thought we're just gonna slide this engine in here, get it over and done with, and fire it up. Guess what? Heh 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 heh. But we kept on trying different ways, different approaches, different angles. We didn't give up. I thought because it's such a big car, it's gonna have a lot of space in the engine bay. Oh no, that's not the case. Okay, so this engine's not gonna go in. We're gonna have to remove the downpipes. It took us a long time to get the downpipes on there. Now we need to take them off. That's part of it. So we're gonna try to remove the one downpipe on the driver's side, just to give us a bit more left to right movement to get the engine down in there. So that's what we need to do now. Take 3. And after some more time and energy and brainstorming, it looked like our plan was going to work. But those downpipes that we removed, it's going to take us a long time to get them fitted back to the car. And there she's snug in her brand new forever home, happy as can be. So let's connect a few things and see if this engine will fire up. So we've got the engine in, we just connected fuel supply, there's oil in the engine, those type of things. The rest we still need to do. So we're going to do a startup now just to make sure that this engine is good. So I've got some plastic on there just in case something sprays out. But we're not going to run this engine for too long, and this is basically just to make sure that the engine is good and we can continue fitting back the gearbox and all those type of things. So let's fire this baby up. Let's hope for the best. Oh yeah, that sounds beautiful. Let me start it again. I can't run it for too long. I also don't want to go and rev it, and I mean that's the first startup this engine has ever done, so in this car. So let's fire it up again. Those aquaponics are talking, I'm telling you. I need to hold my leg because I really want to rev this thing, but I shouldn't. Maybe just a little, just a tad. That sounds like success. That will be a wrap for now, guys. If you like this type of content and you want to see this car back on the road, hit that subscribe button and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Cheers.